the world's strangest accident while testing a new rocket ship. Our heroes were bombarded by mysterious cosmic rays from outer space. Though they crash-landed safely, the strange and powerful rays had changed.
Hi, welcome to This Week in Comics. This week, I picked up Uncanny X-Men number 35, or 700, The Ultimates number 1, and Falling in Love on the Path to Hell number 1. The interesting thing about all these books is that they all have a white border around them. Just an interesting style choice that all the covers are having these days. Uncanny X-Men number 35, or 700, The End of the Krakoan Era. This mega-size issue is jam-packed with creators. 19 people worked on this book. It marks the end of Krakoa, the mutant sovereign nation-state, which is also a mutant island. Honestly, I only read these X-Men books, from House and Powers of X to Swords of X event, and mainly the X-Men books, although I did pick up a few Wolverine books, and that was because the artist was Victor Bogdanovich, whose work I really like because it's similar to Greg Capullo's. There were a lot of fun stories in this issue, although they were all intended as soft transitions into the next era of X-Men comics, so there wasn't really tons of payoff. In the book, we see the X-Men reunited with comrades that got trapped in the White Hot Room during the Fall of X event. The X-Men that escaped, for them it's only been a few weeks, but the people in the White Hot Room, it's been 15 years. So they return, and they come back to bring Krakoa with them back to the White Hot Room, where they say they've ascended into a new stage of evolution. Battle ensues over this because most people want Krakoa to stay. They want the Krakoan nation to still be, and all the technology that comes along with it. It's not really any high stakes action, and that's just because we know that this is a transition. So nothing serious really is going to happen in this book as far as deaths of characters. And this does mark the end of the resurrection for the X-Men, I believe. Although the mutants who did the resurrection, 4 of them still exist if I'm not mistaken, so they could technically still maybe make it happen, but I think that's kind of something they're trying to move away from. In the end, Krakoa leaves, and it marks the end of an era. When it comes to the character development in this book, there's not really tons of it, and that's just because it's the end. It's the last story in this epic, and it's really nice to see the way they close it up in various ways, although there are, loose ends that they have to tie up in kind of quick ways, but it's still very fun. The main character development we get is with Professor X, who is now Prisoner X. In the End of the Fall of X event, Professor X killed some humans on a ship who were going to bomb some mutants, and he did some other things off-panel which were inhumane per se, or illegal. And so at the end of the books, he turned himself into the American government, and he is facing justice in a cell which was created by some of the sharpest minds on Earth. But it is revealed that he put mental suggestions in them to always build backdoors in it for him to be able to still use his powers. So in this issue, Wolverine tries to kill him. He and Magneto have a nice bro sesh. He fakes his own death so as to, I'm guessing, escape prison, although that's not entirely clear. And he also goes out into the universe and meets Jean, who is changing the composition of a star so as to save a solar system, if I'm not mistaken. So a bunch of really cool stuff with Professor X. And with the other characters, it just shows soft little stories so as to set up what's coming with the X-Men in the future. One of the books that is coming out soonest is the X-Men by Gail Simone, if I'm not mistaken. No. That's the later one coming out. What's coming out is going to be X-Men by Jed MacKay and Ryan Stegman, which I'm going to be picking up, mainly because I've been a fan of Ryan Stegman's work ever since his work on the Superior Spider-Man. So, all that being said, my reactions to this book were, one, kind of sad to see the Krakoan Age ending, and ending in such a way. I was very excited by a lot of the prospects that these books brought, and especially I picked up a little bit of X-Men Red, which was when the X-Men, or the mutants, set up a new planet, or not a new planet, but they set up a new society on Mars, and it was a mutant planet. And I really like that idea because I like the idea of the X-Men going into space and doing their own thing and perhaps getting away from the whole old hat mutants versus mankind thing. And especially given that the X-Men have ventured so far into the galaxy already and have plenty of contacts in the Shi'ar Empire, I see no reason why this has to stay in the way that it is, which is just kind of, I don't know, it's stuck in a rut to me. The other thing is, I really, just in general, haven't liked the character progression of Professor X for the past few decades, which is that they're making his character grayer and grayer to the point now where he is a villain, just outright. He's Prisoner X, not Professor X, Prisoner X, which is a villain name. And I just don't like that because Professor X, in my mind, at least growing up, he was always the classic, good guy who was the father figure for a lot of these mutants, and he was supposed to kind of be doing the right thing, and they've really, I don't know, cast that illusion aside at this point, and now they're just going with the whole, he's a bloodthirsty, maybe not bloodthirsty, cutthroat, cold-hearted man who's just willing to do whatever for, the ends justify the means, and that's just not really what I envisioned Professor X ever, and it's very sad to see that continue down that path. The last thing I would say is that I'm very skeptical about these X-Men books moving forward, and that's mainly to do with the fact that Marvel, the comics and the movies, has become a kind of Ouroboros-like monster, in that the Marvel comics influenced what were the Marvel movies, but now the Marvel movies are influencing the Marvel comics, which are influencing the Marvel movies, which are influencing the Marvel comics, and so on and so forth, to where now it's kind of like, what are we even writing stories about at this point? And especially, I'm pretty sure these new X-Men books are going to be very similar to a lot of books that have come out recently, in which they are just trying to set up stories which are then going to be portrayed on screen. New stories that are supposed to be fun and updated for modern audiences. And as a result, I think it's going to be a bastardization of the X-Men, whereas the Krakoan era seemed to be, in many ways, not entirely what I liked, but very much a celebration of the X-Men. So we'll see what goes on with that moving forward. Like I said, I'm definitely going to pick up the Jed MacKay book with Ryan Stegman, and I will be picking up the Gail Simone book as well, as they're the main X-Men titles. And I kind of want to pick up X-Factor and X-Force. X-Force has Deadpool in it. X-Factor looks like it's a group led by Angel, which should be interesting. Ultimates number 1. The New Ultimates. In this issue, we pick up with Tony Stark, or Iron Lad in this new universe, and his team after the destruction of Stark Tower. They jump 6 months into the future, and they're hiding on a Black Ops satellite that can't be detected. They're trying to fix the universal alterations of the Maker. At first, they attempt to do so using time travel, which is the device which powers Tony Stark's suit, the Immortus engine. But this only results in the loss of many allies, or potential allies. In the process, though, they do crack Captain America's ice and free him, but in telling him that America is no longer around, he freaks out, which is to be expected, much like the Captain America 1 movie at the end of it when they play that baseball recording and he bursts out of the room and runs out into Times Square to see that the whole world has changed. So instead they choose to recruit face-to-face, and they only have 2 years until the Maker comes out of the city that he's created, and that's when a battle is to ensue, I guess. They have a run in... The first people they recruit are Jaina Van Dyne and Hank Pym, who are pest removal experts in this universe. They're called to a job to a restaurant where they're supposed to remove some pests, and they find out that these pests are actually Maloids who are living in the basement, and they refuse to remove these pests. They tell the owner that he needs to get a service in there to relocate these people, or, well, not people, but beings. On their way home, they're talking about having kids and some dreams they're having, and they're interrupted by Tony Stark, who's floating in the street above their car and tells them that he's there to recruit them, basically, and Hank freaks out and drives away. And he starts telling Janet, I would never hurt you, which is kind of weird, but that's because Hank got an orb, much like Spider-Man did in the beginning of Ultimate Spider-Man #1, and from Tony Stark. And so he's been hiding that he knows that they were supposed to be heroes, or at least got some information revealing that. And eventually Tony stops them and he begins to recruit them. Janet's excited and joins them. Before Hank can join them, Captain Britain attacks them, who's one of the creators' inner circle. And the Ultimates fight back. While they're fighting back, Captain America convinces Hank to join them. And we find out, too, that Hank has a severe brain injury, which I'm pretty sure, not revealed yet, but pretty sure the Maker had something to do with this. And after Captain America convinces Hank to join them, against his better wishes, because according to the files he received, he doesn't really like the Hank Pym that he learns about from Earth 616, saying he's a very flawed man. But Captain America pretty much tells him, you don't have to be that guy. So he joins him, turns into Giant Man, and squashes Captain Britain. And thus the new Ultimates are formed. And then the issue ends with a letter from Tony Stark to Howard Stark. So it was a pretty good issue and pretty good start to the new Ultimates. I like the reimagining a lot of these characters, especially Dr. Doom, who is Reed Richards in this universe. And it seems like there's something else going on with him, like maybe another game is being played by him, or he has ulterior motives to some degree. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. The intro of the story was a bit choppy. It went over the whole them trying to fix things with time travel a bit too much. I think it was felt like filler, and some of the writing in there felt kind of silly, like not very serious. It was mainly recap too, and so a lot of that recap just didn't feel like the writer put his heart into it, because he was just trying to summarize somebody else's work. But aside from that, it was a fun story, and the art was really nice. It was flowy and loose, and the colors were really soft, which gave it a nice appeal. My only qualm with the book really was the letter at the end of the book, which is basically Tony Stark complaining to his father about his father and telling him that he's going to fix all the mistakes his father made in the world, which is just not a sentiment I really can get on board with in general. I very much believe in honoring one's parents, and to me that's kind of what Tony Stark is as a character. He's very much like the Stark name and carrying it forward. That's a classic character trope of his, as far as I'm concerned. I could be mistaken there, but also it's just a modern thing of people attacking the past, which I don't really like, because people don't tend to understand the past very well. History isn't something that we all know a lot of, unfortunately. And when learning history, it becomes a lot more complicated than just saying good guy, bad guy. It's a bit more than that. And on top of that, I kind of, from reading Ultimate Invasion, got the impression that Howard Stark was one of the heroes of the story, not that he was somebody who caused the problem. So, I don't know. Hopefully they expand on that more and it turns out a bit different. But either way, I'm going to continue reading the book. It's very exciting to see this new Ultimate Universe and where it's going. Falling in Love on the Path to Hell, #1. This book is a bloody, action-packed romp. The art is great in it, and the writing is pretty good. But the entire issue is set up for the main story, which takes place at like the last few pages. And it's more akin to a zero issue. So we get mainly just world build and character background. It's exactly what the title implies. We first follow a cowboy who dies, and then a samurai woman who dies, and this is in the late 1800s if I'm not mistaken. And when they die, they see an island off the coast where they die, and it's implied that that's like hell or purgatory or whatever it may be, and they travel there. And when they travel there, they are surrounded by dead bodies, and they're two of the few to stand up, and they see each other and they start to fight a bit, and they're interrupted by a giant monster who is then interrupted by another person that kills the giant monster, and that guy basically says, come with me if you want to live. Not really, but he gets them tells them that they need to stop fighting and come with him. So it was a fun story, a lot of great art in it. I loved the coloring, I loved the pencils and the inks, just great stuff. It's a fun book so far, although not a lot to judge here. It's still very early on, and like I said, it's mainly setting, build, and character background. So I'm excited to see where it goes. Jerry Duggan is the writer, if I'm not mistaken. Artist Gary Brown. Jerry Duggan wrote X-Men Red, the book where the X-Men went to Mars, which I talked about earlier, and it's pretty darn good writing, very fun stuff, and he writes really compelling things. One thing I'm somewhat excited about, but also skeptical about, is the romance aspect of this book. I think romance isn't something that comic book writers tend to do a very good job at a lot of times. Not that they fail to do it at all. It's just I think that comic book writers often over-fantasize the romance, whereas, a simple romance story really can be amazing. And it's something that can be compatible with sci-fi as well if you keep it simple within a complicated story on the outside. It's just oftentimes they want to add fantastical or magical or just sci-fi elements to the romance, whereas that's just not something we can relate to as normal people. So that's only something we'll see. I'm definitely going to continue to pick up the book. In looking it up, I don't know how many issues this is going to be. I suspect it'll be something akin to Once and Future or Firepower, in that it's kind of like a 30 to 45 issue series. Probably nothing like Spawn in that it's going to be ongoing for the rest of our lives. But, really fun stuff, and we'll see where it goes.
It was the world's strangest accident while testing a new rocket ship. Our heroes were bombarded by mysterious cosmic rays from outer space. Though they crash-landed safely, the strange and powerful rays had changed